The International Women's Forum of South Africa has welcomed the approval of 3 gender-based violence bills: the Criminal Law Amendment Bill, the National Register for Sexual Offences and the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill have been submitted to Parliament. Let's discuss the importance of these bills. We're joined by Trifosa Ramano, who is the board member of the International Women's Forum of South Africa. Good evening. Thank you so much for your time tonight. There's certainly been mixed reaction to, these bills now finding their way to Parliament. We spoke to a gender activist here on the, on Newzroom Afrika last week, who was raising concerns around, the fact that there are still some, issues that really need to be ironed out when it comes to some of these bills, particularly looking at how and where the money is going to be coming from to boost investigations in South Africa, especially when you look at the number of detectives that South Africa has when it comes to policing matters and even equipping some of our police officers with the necessary skills in order for them to be able to, basically adhere to some of what is contained in those bills. I see that you are welcoming that tonight, but what do you say to some of the criticism that has been leveled against these bills?
I think the issue of gender-based violence and femicide is one of the crucial issues in the pandemic that we are facing in this country. There's been a lot of talk, and in 2018, we have seen a number of women now protesting to say enough is enough. And then we have seen the summit in which the president held a summit against GBVF in November 2018 as a response to a number of those issues. And that's the time when you also saw in the previous year, women also marching to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to say enough is enough, and submitted some of the 21 issues that they wanted the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to deal with. So for me, the critical issue in dealing with GBVF, it has been the legislation and the framework that deals with it. And then if you see in some of these legislation, what you are dealing with, the amendment that dealing with the stricter bail conditions, whereby if you are being arrested and it's against the GBVF, there are stricter rules in which the bail conditions you can adhere to. And then also when you look in terms of the Sexual Offences Act, some of the amendment in there, the law was only talking about sexual offences against children and also people who are disabled. Now they have amended it to include the vulnerable groups, because the definition of a child is up to a particular age. And then you have the young adults who are still at university below the age of 25. So they included that in terms of the legislation. And also they call them vulnerable groups. And then also the elderly who are above 60 years of age. So that's effectively just to strengthen that and to make sure that if you have been accused or have been found guilty in committing those sexual offences against this group of people. So even when you're looking for a job, you need to disclose because your name is going to appear in the national register. And then if you have to work with older people and you have to work with even anybody who's below the age of 25, you need to disclose. And then you cannot work with those vulnerable groups because of you have actually been convicted of that. So I think for us, the strengthening of the legislation is very important. And also when you look in terms of the, if for domestic violence, if maybe I have a problem and I have to go to police station to lay charges about domestic violence, before they could arrest, they need to go and get the warrant of arrest for that in the court. So, but now the law has actually made it easier to mean that you don't need a warrant of arrest before you can go and arrest the perpetrators in terms of the domestic violence. And these are the things that the women have all been complaining about, to say strengthen the legislation, to make sure that the legislative framework that is there, make sure that whenever we have to deal with this, there's no point in arresting people, they don't make it to the court, or there are weaknesses in the system. So for us as the IWFSA, Since we had an engagement with the president at the beginning of the year, we said we come from the private sector, we understand this thing, and some of these things that are happening within the GBVF, they also affect the private sector, and they affect the productivity in the workplace. And even some of the perpetrators are actually the employees within the private sector. So we really need to work collaboratively with the government on those particular issues. Hence, you saw this month, the Minister of Women has actually launched the National Strategic Priorities, the 6 NSPs that actually they're dealing with in terms of the GBVF.